Good evening, dears. Today we'll discuss an essay prescribed in your women's writing paper. The essay is the introduction chapter of Mary Eagleton's text, Feminist Literary Theory, a Reader. So, the first 8 chapters of this introduction chapter is prescribed for you. Now, before moving on to the text, let's quickly have a recap of feminism, the different movements involved in feminism. Maybe you are familiar with all these historical facts, but still, as we are discussing women's writing, we ought to know something about feminism. Okay, so what is feminism? Feminism is not a singular or unitary concept. Okay, feminism is not a singular concept. It is not something which focuses on only one thing. It is not a unitary concept. Then what is it? It is a polyvalent concept. That means it is diverse, multi-layered. It consists of many complex and contradictory ideas. It involves many things. It is not a singular concept, but it involves diverse things, and it can be applied to diverse fields of activity as well. Now, what is the key objective of feminism? Feminism addresses the issue of women's inferior position in society. We all know the way society, be it Western society or Eastern society, be it any country, be it any culture, we know the gender inequality that is prevailing in all communities, in all cultures. So, the basic agenda of feminism or feminist writers or feminist activists is to address this issue, is to address the issue of women's inferior position in society. Women are always considered as the second sex. They are given a secondary status in society. We know many things have changed, but still, this ideology is something that prevails even now. So feminism addresses, or feminism tries to seek many ways and methods to elevate or to decrease the social, cultural, political and economic discrimination that women are subjected to. Okay, so this is the basic objective of any feminist activist. What is it? To address the issue of women's inferior position in society. And so they are trying out different ways and methods to decrease that discrimination, to decrease the social, cultural, political and economic discrimination that women are subjected to. Okay. Now moving on to the term feminism. From where did we get this term? The term feminism, it can be traced back to the 1870s, 1871. During that period, this term was used as a medical term. Okay, the term feminism was used as a medical term to define symptoms of feminization of the bodies of male patients. During that time, several doctors, they found that some male patients, they have this femininity or female attributes in their body. So those symptoms of femininity in male body, that in order to describe that, this term feminism or feminization was used. And later, Femme, F-E-M-M-E, femme, the word femme was used to identify women who behaved in a masculine way as well. Okay, you see the transition. First, it was used to describe a medical condition wherein feminine attributes within male bodies, that was the term was used to signify that. But later, the word femme, F-E-M-M-E, was used to identify women who behaved in a masculine way. Okay, so you can see many changes come across the word feminism, and it was by the 1910, by the early decade of the 20th century, especially in Europe and America, that this term flourished. Fine, this term called feminism flourished, and by that time it came to refer to several movements, several struggles that women started. Women started fighting for better wages. Women started fighting for job security. So, all such struggles for space, for recognition, that came to be included under the term feminism or feminist movements. And then when you look at the history of the modern Western feminist movements, we can classify it into three waves. Okay, we can classify the modern Western feminist movements into three waves. The first wave refers to the movement of the 19th through early 20th century. And it is in the first wave of feminism there came a radical notion that women are also people. Women are also important, equal to men. So that was the radical idea that was introduced in the first wave of feminism. The first wave is also called the women's movement. And this movement comprised of struggles for legal and political rights. They mainly dealt with suffrage, working conditions, and educational rights for women and girls. The second wave of feminism, which was basically during the 1960s to the 1980s. And the second wave of feminism is considered as a remarkable event in human history, and they claim that the second wave of feminism marks the end of the patriarchy. And you see, women become active in politics. They demanded and won the rights to university education. They won the right to have a career, and they also won the right to claim divorce, to be independent if it is a very torturous relationship. So you see, during the second wave, they mainly dealt with the inequality of laws as well as the cultural inequalities and the role of women in society. Women started claiming their rights as independent human beings. They started questioning the laws which gave a predominance to men. Now, apart from that, they also dealt with sexuality, workplace, family, marital rape, domestic violence, and reproductive rights. These were the main concerns of the second wave of feminism. The second wave criticized the male-dominated cultural practices in society. So as a result of the first and the second wave, the women attained the right to vote. Then they also got the Equal Pay Act. Now the text, feminist literary theory, a reader. This was first published in 1986. And the second edition of the text was published in 1996. Now, this is considered as one of the classic works of second and third wave feminism and its literary studies. Okay, this book is considered as one of the classic texts of second and third wave feminist literary studies. And especially in this introduction chapter, we get to know about the various positions of major feminist critics in the field of women's writing. So now let's move on to the text. Now the text begins with a quotation taken from Tilly Olson's essay, which was published in 1972. Tilly Olson was an American writer, and she belonged to the first generation of American feminists. She was born in 1912 and she died in 2007. So this essay, the essay prescribed for you, it begins with a quotation taken from Tilly Olson's essay. So in this essay, Tilly Olson says that the women's movement has for the first time brought a renewed interest in the writings and writers of the female sex. So Tilly Olson says that the women's movement, it is only because of the women's movement that women authors and their writings came to be recognized. And then she says it is only because of the feminist movements that came up that the books, poems, or other artistic expressions by women that came to be explored. And the word that she uses is resurrected. She says that the women's movement resurrected the classics written by other women who had gone before us. Otherwise, without this women's movement, they all would have been neglected, ignored. But it is only because of without this women's movement, all those old writers, old women writers who belong to the past generations, they would have been neglected, ignored. So not only that did the women's movement resurrect the old women writers, but we also see new writers coming up with new testimonies, new experiences, and they talk about the inequalities that they had to face, the restrictions, the denials, all those painful memories, painful experiences that the women had to undergo, all those struggles that they had to undergo. So with the coming of this women's movement, all these came to be documented, or the world came to understand about the sufferings, about the tortures, about the discrimination, about the capabilities, about the capacities, about the talents, the skills, everything related to women. In short, she says that because of, again, this women's movement, we or the world came to know what it is to be female. Okay? Otherwise, everything, the women's experience, everything was represented through the eyes of the male author. But only because of the women's movement, women started representing themselves. Okay. So it is with this excerpt that our introduction starts. And this excerpt is an essay. It actually is taken from an essay by Tillie Olson, the American feminist, and this essay was first published in 1972, and later it became part of a volume called Silences. Okay, it became part of a volume called Silences. The volume was titled Silences, and the essay was titled Breaking the Silence. Okay. And so Mary Eagleton, as she quotes this excerpt from Tillie Olson's essay, she says that all the things related to that essay is important. The publication date is important, the title is significant, and what the author Tillie Olson conveys is also significant. The publication date is 1972. And she says that, Mary Eagleton says that it is exactly after the 1970s that women writers or women realized that there is a lack of space, or there is a denial of space, especially in terms of artistic representation. And this again led to the second wave of feminism, which started precisely it started during the 1960s, but again this was a prominent phase. The 1970s was a prominent phase of second wave of feminism, wherein the women started, or they realized, and they also started to write their own experiences. They started to represent themselves. This is what exactly it means to be a female, and not what the male writers have always told. So it was during this phase that they realized that there was a denial of space for women's representation. And writers like Tillie Olson were instrumental in creating that awareness that women writers had been silenced and they had been excluded from literary history. So the title of the essay is significant. The title of Olson's essay was Breaking the Silence. So these writers like Tillie Olson, Mary Eagleton states that writers like Tillie Olson, they broke the silence. They started demanding for a space, a position in the literary history. So the publication date is important, the title is important, and then also the content is also important, because Mary Eagleton states that Olson's quotation, it exemplifies the desire to rediscover the lost works of women writers. Okay? The women writers who lived and wrote during the early centuries, they were mostly neglected. There were many writers who were still not explored. So during this second phase of feminism, there arose a trend and a tendency to explore these long lost works by women writers. And you also see that there was a wish among the women writers to manifest what it is to be female. They wanted to declare for themselves their experiences, their perceptions that have been unheard till now. Okay, so this is the introduction. Mary Eagleton is taking the quotation by Tillie Olson from Tillie Olson's essay, and she's saying everything about this essay is very significant. The date, the title, and also the content is significant, and these are the reasons. Okay, this is how she starts the introduction chapter of that text.